Here are 20 more duologues for 2 female performers. These are aimed at young adults, so the characters, content and themes will all be more mature and challenging. Right, let's go. Alice and Fiona from Rotterdam by John Britton. This scene is Act 1, Scene 1. Start on page 5 at Alice's line, "Right, there, I'm finished," and end on page 8 at Fiona's line, "I was right about you, wasn't I?" In Alice and Fiona's flat, Alice is completing a coming out email to her parents and Fiona is offering advice. Meanwhile, Fiona is about to reveal something about her identity that will change everything. End where I've suggested for a strong 5-minute version, or carry on to page 14 for a 10 to 15-minute version which has a real sledgehammer ending. Jess and Lucy from Lucy Light by Sarah Milton. Start on page 17 at Lucy's line, "I've never known a seagull to respect a hangover," and end on page 22 at Lucy's line, "No one's ever going to marry me." At this part of the play, Jess and Lucy are 24 and 25 respectively. It's the morning after Lucy's ex Gary's wedding, and she has a confession to make. There are 2 moments of direct address in this scene, which might be a bit jarring out of context of the rest of the play, so you could cut these if it makes the scene clearer. Rose and Cass from Eigengrau by Penelope Skinner. This is scene 5. Start on Rose's line, "Hi," on page 27, and end on page 32 at Cass's line, "Yeah, no, next time, maybe." Cassie and Rose are flatmates and they're debating why Mark isn't calling Cassie back when she thinks it's real love. End where I've suggested, or for an extended version, go through to the end of the scene on page 36. Elena and Sonia from Uncle Vanya, adapted by Robert Icke. Start on page 47 at Elena's line, "The storm's past, that air, wonderful," and end on page 51 at Sonia's line, "He said no." This is a contemporary adaptation of Chekhov's play. Sonia and Elena are sharing a moment of connection together in an attempt to end their tensions. Harriet and Jenna from Colder Than Here by Laura Wade. This is scene 3. On page 36, start at Harriet's line, "What, she didn't tell you?" and end on page 42 at Jenna's line, "Isn't even a bloody loo." Harriet and Jenna are sisters, and they're meeting in a burial ground to discuss their mother's funeral plans as she is terminally ill. End where I've suggested, or go through to the end of the scene for an extended version. Mary and Her from Yerma by Simon Stone. This is Act 1, Scene 7. Start on page 37 at Mary's line, "Any problems?" and end on page 42 at Her's line, "I'm fine, I said I was fine, I'm fine." Mary and Her are discussing the challenges of mothering and men. It's a scene brimming with subtext and hidden pain. Jane and Bella from The Girl's Guide to Saving the World by Eleanor Cook. This is the opening of the play. Start on page 3 at Jane's line, "How long is it again?" and end on page 10 at Jane's line, "Time's up." Jane and Bella are both 29, and Jane is helping Bella with a pregnancy test in this incredibly fast and energetic scene. End where I've suggested for a great cliffhanger ending, or you can go all the way through to the end of the scene for a more resolute conclusion. Ramona and Pocahontas from Ramona Tells Jim by Sophie Wu. This is scene 11. On page 56, start at Pocahontas' line, "Not the greatest lover in the world, is he?" and end at the end of the scene on page 61 at her line, "Because you know it's effed up." This is a hilarious scene between Ramona and Pocahontas in Jim's flat. Pocahontas is Jim's ex. It's nervous, tense and scatty. The characters are weird and totally wonderful. It's a real comedic gem. Tosh and Lou from Scenes with Girls by Miriam Batty. This is the start of the play, scene 1. Start on page 13 at Tosh's line, "That's quite strong," and end on page 19 at Tosh's line, "Right." This is a chatty, fluid scene between 2 flatmates, Lou and Tosh. The writer states that they communicate very, very, very quickly. They are completely in sync. Anne and Steph from Wilderness by Kelly Smith. Start on page 19 at Steph's line, "That's incredible," and end on page 27 at Anne's line, "Enjoy your coffee." Anne is Joe's ex, and Steph is Joe's new girlfriend. Anne and Joe have a child together, and Anne is visiting Steph at work. Anne is deeply anxious and paranoid about Steph's role looking after her child. This scene is brilliantly tense, awkward, and crammed full of fierce subtext. Raya and Kelly from Artefacts by Mike Bartlett. This is part 3, scene 3. Start on page 57 at Raya's line, history, and end on page 65 at Raya's line, yeah. Kelly and Raya are half-sisters, and this scene happens at the end of the play. They're visiting the British Museum and looking at an Iraqi vase that was used as a ransom when Raya was kidnapped in Iraq. At the scene's heart is a clash of cultures and of two young women's contrasting ideals. Joy and EJ from I Will Still Be Whole When You Rip Me in Half by Ava Wong Davies. This duologue is part 2. Start on page 30 at Joy's line, I'm sorry, and end on page 49 at EJ's line, yeah, okay. Joy and EJ are Chinese and mother and daughter. In this section of the play, they meet for the first time since Joy walked out on EJ as a baby. The text is poetical, fast, and incredibly effective. Sarah and Authority from Perve by Stacey Gregg. This section begins on page 56 at Authority's line, Sarah, can you describe for me your relationship with your brother? And ends on page 62 at Sarah's line, can I see my mum now? This is a tense and fast police interview scene. Sarah is 16 and her brother Gethin is accused of being a paedophile. This is halfway through the story and the police are using Sarah to build a case against him. Frankie and Sarah from Soft Animals by Holly Robinson. This is scene 1. Start on page 8 at Sarah's line, did you do this? And end on page 13 at Sarah's line, I wasn't planning on Frankie. Sarah is white and in her late 30s, and Frankie is black and in her late teens. Frankie has arrived at Sarah's front door after they previously had a brief but life-changing encounter. There's a quick shift of time and place in the middle of this scene, which you could cover with a conjoining line or perhaps the use of sound design or lighting. Angela and Birch from Acceptance by Amy Eng. This is scene 2. Start on page 11 at Birch's line, good evening, and end on page 16 at Birch's line, you're thinking too much. Angela is 17 from Hong Kong and she's interviewing at the Elliott University in Boston, Massachusetts with Birch, who is older, and the Dean of Admissions. It's a nervous and intense interview scene where Angela's mental health has a precarious impact on events. Mother and Daughter from Arctic Oil by Claire Duffy. Start on page 9 at Mother's line, where is this party? And end on page 14 at Mother's line, when that little boy in there needs his mum. Mother and Daughter are on a remote Scottish island and Daughter is deceiving her mum as to why she's leaving. Daughter's baby boy is in the next room and Mother knows that her daughter is an activist and that she's leaving to take part in a dangerous protest at an oil rig. This section is a succinct selection from the continuous action of the whole play, and this scene works really nicely as a standalone scene. Tash and Miss Jules from Little Sweet Thing by Roy Williams. Start on page 17 at Tash's line, are you gonna move, miss? And end on page 23 at Tash's line, chill out, miss. Tash is black and in her mid-teens, and Miss Jules is black and in her early 30s, and they're in detention together. This is a fun, tense, antagonistic scene. Helen and Robin from Meet Me at Dawn by Zinnie Harris. Start on page 11 at Robin's line, are you okay? And end on page 21 at Robin's line, everything went down with the boat. Helen and Robin are two women who have just experienced a boat sinking, and they're on the beach in the aftermath. It's a mysterious and intriguing play, and this opening section is poetical and curious. Victoria and Nikki from A Kind of People by Gurpreet Kaurbati. This is scene 6. Start on page 45 at Victoria's line, unfortunately head office didn't feel it was his time, and end on page 49 at Nikki's line, I didn't think so. This scene is in Victoria's office, where Nikki's partner Gary recently quit his job working for Victoria. The three of them were friends, but this scene brings that to a crashing end as Nikki challenges Victoria's attitudes and behaviour. Ash and Christine from Light Falls by Simon Stevens. Start on page 77 at Ash's line, "Mum," and end on page 87 at Christine's line, "Let's see, shall we?" This scene has Ash speaking to her mum, Christine, after Christine has died. It's a moving, funny, and beautifully written scene. It's quite a long scene, so you might want to end it early at the bottom of page 84 after Christine says, "I know." And there we go, 20 more duologues for 2 female performers. These plays are available on Drama Online, or you can order the playtext from the publishers. Bloomsbury, which now incorporates Methuen Drama and Oberon Books, Nick Hearn Books, Faber and Faber, or you can order them from Amazon. Thanks for watching. If this video helped you, please give it a like. Do check out these other videos and subscribe. And if you want to support what I do and the channel, you can click on the link in the video description. All the best.